Welcome to the Just Ingredients podcast. I'm Cara Lynn, and here we talk all things nourishing to the mind, body, and soul. This is a place where you can find just good ingredients to life. Vinnie Crispino went from being an impressive D1 swimmer to being completely bedridden after he broke his back in a surfing accident. Inspired by his own healing journey, he has made it his life's mission to help others alleviate pain and regain their sense of well-being. He is the founder of the Pain Academy, which helps people address their pain and become pain-free for good. His message is simple. Movement is the key to healing. You already have all the tools you need. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you, Vinnie, so much for being here today. I'm actually really excited for my followers and listeners to hear from you and hear about your story. And so thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having. Honored to be on the show.
Well, in fact, let's start with your story. Why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and maybe your story? Because I think your story is fascinating.
Yeah, so I think to give my story context, we'll go back to, the start of this. I was when I was a young man, I was a Division I collegiate athlete, 8-time All-American. I was a great swimmer. I felt just like Superman. Nothing could break me. I could always push my body. Whatever I asked of my body, it gave it to me. It was amazing. I was really blessed when I was a young man. And as life goes, life finds a way to humble you. And I was humbled pretty hard in my early 20s. I broke my back in a surfing accident. And I went in literally a matter of seconds to being that young, strong, capable guy to just disabled. And It was a stark reality. I mean, it was a wake-up call. Never really needing to take care of your body, just always pushing it and being allowed to push it and being rewarded for pushing it hard, to now I can barely even stand up for more than a few minutes. So I had a radical shift in life experience from this accident, which is why they call it a life-changing injury.
Right.
And I think my story from there is probably like most people's when they're in pain. Now, they don't have to go break their back to resonate with the story. What do we do when we don't feel good? Well, we go see the experts and we see the doctors and the PTs and the chiros and acupuncture. We go through this system to try to get better, and sometimes it works. And for me, I found out many times that it really didn't work in the way that I needed it to. And after years, and we're talking years after the fractures healed and the herniations healed. By the way, for context, the official injury was a T12 spinal fracture, multiple herniations, significant nerve damage. The impact of the rock that I fell on that hit my lower back shifted my spine 21 degrees to the left.
Oh, wow.
So it was a traumatic injury.
Yeah.
And I did what people do, which is you go look for help. And after years of looking for help, years after the fractures healed and the herniations healed, I was still getting worse. My life was no better. MRIs were okay, x-rays were okay, but I was just in this really slippery downward slope of the quality of my life getting worse. I was pushing people away. And, I didn't really have a lot longer that I could continue down that path. And so I just made a really hard pivot, and I took radical accountability and responsibility for this problem. I put myself back through school. I figured I was actually the only one who cared enough to resolve this problem. I'm the only one that's got to live with it. There was no paying people that was getting me where I needed to go. And so I devoted what would be the next 14 years of my life to understand physiology. What do you need to do to come back from a life-changing injury? And how can you go from this feeling of this broken body going around in this hamster wheel of chronic pain, that vicious cycle, to trying to find out how do you actually have a meaningful life again and do the things that you love doing without always paying the price for it?
Wow. That's quite the journey. So I'm curious, were you just surfing out with friends? I mean, just a regular surf day, but crashed on a wave and hit a rock? Is that how it happened?
I wish I was with friends. That would have been so much easier and more helpful, but it was a solo surf session. I went out on a day that was just way too big. I mean, most surfers just weren't even going out into the water because they know. But I was a very young, arrogant guy thinking I can tame the ocean. Her power is nothing against my swimming skills going up and down a pool. I can handle waves, no problem. I was a much better swimmer than I was a surfer. So I was strong enough to get out into the waves, but I was not at all technically skilled enough to ride these things. And that first wave, it took me out, threw me on my back. I hit something in the bottom of the ocean. And it was a very lonely, terrifying experience. You know, when I first surfaced and gasped for air, the first thing I did was look down at my left leg because I couldn't feel it anymore. I thought it got, and this is me being dramatic, but I thought it got ripped off. I couldn't feel it. Remember, I was really good at swimming. I knew what it felt like to kick both my legs, and I could only feel my right leg move around.
Scary.
So yeah, it was terrifying. And I think the amount of time spent uncomfortable in the water, just given my swimming background and training, that's what got me back to the shore. Okay. You know, I immediately rolled over onto my back, started doing little motions with my hand, then tried to do a little doggy paddle. By the time I got back to the shore, I mean, I obviously wasn't standing. It was a crawl to the car. And, you know, I think it sounds so silly being out of it, but I was in a state of shock. I didn't call
for sure.
the paramedics. I didn't call 911. I just had this moment of I need to be alone and process what the hell just happened. And so I drove home.
Wow.
And I limped into my house, crawled up my flight of stairs, and I just spent the entire night alone in silence. And I realized, oh, this is not something you're going to wake up and shake off. And then I got some help and went to the hospital.
Wow. What an incredible story. So for 14 years, you looked for help to ease the pain. And so did anything help a little bit?
Yeah. So that's the thing. I mean, things helped, but I found it was just temporary, you know, and it took me years to understand that there is a significant difference between active therapy and passive therapy. So I was doing passive therapy, right? I would bring my body to somebody and they would do something to me, whether it was a chiro adjustment or a PT session or a massage or acupuncture. These professionals that I was paying a lot of money, it was enough to kind of, I guess, keep me going, but my results were entirely dependent on them. And my only game plan, as soon as I was done with those sessions, was to just wait for the next session and to try to get money so I can pay for the next session. And so there was a huge gap in my therapeutic approach. It was missing me. I didn't understand that I needed to participate in my own rescue here and learn how to take care of my body better on a daily basis. And this is why nothing really meaningfully got better. Maybe some appointments were good, some appointments weren't good. It just kind of kept me treading water for years without really making substantial improvement because I was not actively learning what are the things that I need to do to solve this problem.
So interesting. And so you now help a lot of people that deal with pain. And I do want to know what those things are that help people with pain and the things that you just said, you know, you need to be an active participant. And so maybe we'll come back to all the things that you had to do to be an active participant. But let's first start with one, I want to know what the common everyday pains that you see people experiencing. But then two, I want to know what is the first step you recommend people to help them overcome their pain?
Yeah, so probably the two most common areas are the lower back and the hips. And insert a overwhelming list of diagnoses that come into those two different categories. But I'd say the majority of people suffer pain, limitation, dysfunction, and imbalance, or even non-pain symptoms in the hips or the lower back. That seems to be the common denominator between most people. And most people who have those problems also notice that the shoulders feel a little gunky and the knees don't really feel that great. So it's really a body-wide issue that tends to present itself most commonly in the midsection. Step one is we have to down-regulate this problem. We have to relax this problem. So regardless of where your pain is, that's your nervous system saying, hey, something's going on. It's agitated. This is that sympathetic, the fight, flight, freeze. Pain is your nervous system's alarm bells that are ringing that something is going on. that probably shouldn't be going on. Pay attention to me. Before we can meaningfully go after the root cause as to why those alarm bells are going on, I first need to teach people how to calm those down. And that's actually kind of the easy part. And I say easy not to minimize people's experience. I know if somebody would have said, hey, Vin, 5 years into this journey of breaking my back, oh, it's easy to get out of pain, I would have just kind of scoffed and laughed.
Right.
But relatively, you just doing something simple as lying on your back with your legs over a couch or a chair provides the body with a massive level of support. It spreads your center of gravity throughout multiple contact points, and it relaxes the nerves in the muscular system. So most people will find that just lying on their back with their legs over a couch or a chair actually kind of provides this little temporary window of relief. We can't work on a body that's screaming at you. So step one is I teach people various positions and really simple, gentle movements to just start calming and taming the nervous system so we can then go after more meaningful exercises that produce more value and benefit long term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so whenever I go to an expo and I have to stand at our booth for, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, my lower back is killing me by the end. So it can help those that it's just one-time pain versus it's happening every day, correct?
This has been my greatest challenge with running this business and trying to help people is because this is for everybody. I mean, you don't have to have a story like mine to bring yourself towards a self-care practice. You don't even have to be in pain. You could just say, you know what? I want to be able to do more, or I just kind of feel off, or I feel like I'm really not that connected well to my body, or I feel like I'm neglecting it. This is for anybody who wants to improve that mind-body awareness and just move better and feel better.
So when you say mind-body awareness, are you saying that we're not going to heal our pain or fix our pain until our mind connects with our body, meaning that getting it out of that fight or flight nervous system?
That is definitely part of it. A common denominator in most people is we're just not really that in tune with what our bodies are doing on a daily basis. I'll give you a really good example. On my social media account, I at this point have 600 plus before and afters. And anybody in the before photo, they're standing with the majority of their weight on one leg, one shoulder's higher, their body is twisted. Yet I asked them, hey, does it feel like you're standing on both legs the same? And they're like, yeah, it does. Maybe I'll do an assessment where somebody squats down and instead of their body coming right down the middle, they completely shift and veer over to one side. And I always ask, hey, does it feel like you're coming down the middle? Or can you notice if you're going to the right or to the left? And the answer is almost always the same. They feel balanced. They feel like they're standing on both legs because there's this disassociation that's happening. And we tend to normalize what it is we're feeling. So most people who walk with one leg that spends more time on the ground than the other, that's happening thousands of times a day. It would be exhausting if your brain actually paid attention to what's truly happening with your body every step. And so what happens is our nervous system loses that true north and it gets recalibrated to not really pay attention to a lot of these things. Hence why pain starts to enter the picture, because we're not feeling the little non-pain signals of, oh, I'm landing on this foot harder than this foot, or I'm sitting on this hip longer all day long than this hip. We don't pay attention to that. And so these things happen day over day, month over month, year over year. And then finally, the soft tissue is so stressed out in our body that it says, pay attention to me now, pain. You're going to listen right away, immediately, right? Think about like you being at the trade shows all day long. Where's the weight shifted? How is your body resisting that downward pull of gravity? Do you feel an even sense of all of your muscles working to support you? Or is it that lower back is doing a ton of work? Or maybe the right hip is doing a ton of work. And maybe you're engaged with your customers, your fans, you're really present with what's going on in front of you. and not really in tune with what's going on inside until it's like, oh my God, this feels really bad right now.
Right.
I got to get off my feet. I got to go home.
Right. Well, okay, so I'm curious because you're saying like, how are you standing at these expos? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And so you're right. Most people are very not in tune with this. And as you're saying, is one foot more on the ground than the other? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. So how do people even pay attention to this? Or I mean, even know what to pay attention to?
I'll walk you through it. Take 30 seconds to a minute. For anybody who's listening, right now, step one, we can't fix a problem until we become aware of what the problem is. So this is for anybody who this kind of is making sense. They just might not feel great in their body. Maybe they feel stiff or tight or pain. Stand up right now and take your shoes off. And all I want you to do is just observe, does it feel like there's equal weight in both feet? Does it feel 50-50? Or do you feel like you're standing more on one leg than the other leg? So step one is, are we actually using the right and the left sides simultaneously at the same time? Or does it feel slightly offset? And then you can start to scan upward even more. Is there a joint? Is there a muscle? Is there an area on your body that you feel is working harder than another? Because ideally, we should not be drawn towards any one area. Ideally, the majority of our muscles should be holding us up. What most people will find if they just do that, if they slow down for a moment, take their shoes off, and spend 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, where am I at right now? What is happening inside my body? There is a world of information. Is the weight on both heels or is it on both front feet? Maybe it's on the front of one foot and the heel of the other foot. Do you detect irregularities? And the really cool part about this is it's allows for more of a conversation than, hey, does your back hurt or not? And maybe you at the trade shows, it's, let me just check in real quick. What is going on? How am I just standing comfortably? Where is my weight displaced? Because that tells us a lot about why you might be feeling the way you feel. And it starts to open the doorway to a different conversation, which is, why am I feeling this way? Not, hey, just what hurts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm curious, this mind-body connection, can this help reduce pain and help prevent pain, or it's better just for preventing the pain that might come?
It's the first step in getting in tune with your body, because we can't address what we can't feel and what we don't know. If you're just chasing back pain, it's going to be a long journey. But if your back hurts because you recognize, whoa, I'm standing on both legs quite differently, that awareness then leads us to the next question, which is, well, how can I get both legs to work better together? Which leads us to the next question, which exercises? What can I start doing on a daily basis to rebalance my body? And then somebody, when they start doing these exercises, will start to notice, I feel more grounded, I feel more supported, I feel more stable, more secure, just doing basic things like standing or sitting or walking, and then watch what happens to the back pain. So the mind-body awareness is to get very clear on what is happening right now in your body so we can ask better questions to get you feeling better.
Interesting. Okay, so through your 14 years of trying to find help for your pain, you didn't find it. Was it this mind-body connection that helped you realize how to help yourself?
Yeah, it was really the starting point, because everybody was just really focused on my back pain, and rightfully so. That's what I was paying all the money for. I was walking and saying, fix my back right now. And it wasn't until somebody said, who later became a mentor of mine, said, we're not going to waste your time and money on your back. You can't even stand up on your left leg. How on God's green earth could your back feel better if you can't even use both legs the same? Forget your back pain. We're going to go after how your legs are actually working. And I was annoyed because that's not what I'm paying you for. I have very little money. I have to find relief. And it was not even treating the back pain, but more so treating the balance of my body, where then the tug of war in my lower back started to relax. So this awareness, this reconnecting with what is actually happening in my body, was the first step. He was the first person that ever said and looked at my left leg. Nobody cared.
Interesting. It's, to me, sounds like somebody finding your root cause of the pain rather than just working on what felt like the pain.
Yeah, he was trying to go underneath the problem that I thought it was. And that is the next real big point, the mental point that we've got to get to, which is rarely where we think the problem is where the problem's coming from. The area in pain for most people, and this has been time and time and time again, the area that's in pain is rarely the problem.
So interesting.
But it's hard. It's really hard to emotionally feel that when we have all of our attention on one area.
That's really interesting. You know, I talk a lot about mental health and depression, and it's sort of the same thing. The depression is a symptom, and it's just your body screaming that there's pain other places or deficiencies other places. And so it's sort of the same analogy, I feel like. If your back's hurting, it might not just be your back. It's your back screaming with the pain, but the root of the pain is somewhere else. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this, though, because this could be sort of overwhelming to people. So let's say I've got this lower back pain quite often. How in the world do I find someone that helps me figure out what the root cause of this pain is? I mean, is a chiropractor going to figure this out for me?
Yeah, so let me ease the overwhelm, because that's exactly what this can feel like. If anybody pulls one thing from me today, I want it to be this. So this is the full stop. This is the golden nugget for today. Before you go chasing specifics, master the basics first. Repeat that again. Before you go looking for specific solutions, let's first master the basics. Well, here's what I mean by that. Looking for exercises and experts for back pain, that's a specific solution. And if you're bringing a body to these experts that doesn't move well, it doesn't work that well, that is going to significantly complicate whatever modality you're trying to do. So if you've got back pain and you go see a chiro, maybe they could help. They've helped a lot of people. But if your back pain is because your shoulders are unlevel and your hips are uneven and you can hardly use one leg compared to the other leg, adjusting the spine is not enough. And I think a lot of people are going to resonate because they've gone to these traditional modalities and they haven't worked. It's not that the modality is not great. It's that the body they're bringing into that modality has lost basic function. And what most people are going to find is restoring basic movement is actually going to tune up a lot of the problems that they're feeling with their body. So here's what I mean when I say basic movement. Let's say you've got back pain. Well, let's get your ankles and knees and hips to work a little better. Let's get your shoulders to work a little better. That's the basics. You as a human being should be able to reach overhead very clearly without pain. Your hips should be able to bend and flex and rotate and twist. Let's make sure they can do that. And in the process of restoring this basic human movement, which is actually quite simple to do, you'll probably find a lot of relief down that path. This is what I teach. This is what I've spent the last 14 years of my life understanding how to do, which is to help people in simple ways restore the basics of motion. Where people get it wrong and where I got it wrong and spent tens of thousands of dollars getting this wrong is thinking I need specifics and I could ignore the basics. No wonder why things aren't getting better. I was ignoring my entire body. I was thinking back pain existed on an island somewhere and I can just target it and execute that one area. No one area of the body works alone. No one area of the body gets injured alone. And no one area of the body heals alone. So if you're trying these modalities, whatever you're doing out there, if it's not working, it might not actually be that therapy's fault. It might just be because we've lost basic motion and that's what's complicating it. So let's come back to the drawing board. Let's make it simple. Let me show you every day how to come back down to the ground, how to do basic, simple, restorative movements, and let's watch what happens. And it is eye-opening to see what changes.
Okay, but do we have to classify and say, but this is for those without specific injuries? Or because I'm thinking of like a shoulder tear, right? Like a tear in the shoulder. This isn't necessarily going to work. If we have a tear, we've got to get that repaired first. Or this is for any type of pain.
Here's why this is helpful for any type of pain. So 2 things are true. You might have a shoulder tear. Absolutely. And maybe for you, the only way to resolve that shoulder tear is with surgery. That's very true. And you have a body around that shoulder tear that you've had to compensate, right? Think about this. If I go on a hike and I break an ankle, you're going to shift and start moving in really weird ways to avoid pain. Well, most people who have pain, they don't learn to move in the most painful way. They learn to move in the least painful way, which taxes the rest of the body. So you could have a shoulder tear, which is an acute injury on that shoulder. And how have the surrounding joints been compromised? The surrounding joints are now no longer healthy because they're working excessively harder or abnormally to compensate for the shoulder tear. So whether you need shoulder surgery or not, you still have to come back to the crossroads of my body still needs to work. And if you want therapy to be highly successful, it's probably going to be very complicated to make therapy successful even after a shoulder surgery if you've learned to compensate and use your body in very abnormal, precarious ways because you've been in pain.
Okay, so going back to what I asked you at the beginning of the podcast, so are you saying when you said like the 14 years didn't help seeing people, but you figured out how to take care of your body on a daily basis rather than just showing up for those appointments and then not doing anything else? Are you talking about like doing these daily exercises, having this mind-body connection, realizing what your body is doing every day? Is that what you're talking about? Or were there other things that you did as well to take care of your body?
Yeah, that was it. It was me spending time daily on maintenance. So I could recreate results daily. Every day I could relax the nervous system. Every day I could get the nerves and the muscles to improve their communication. Every day I could improve flexibility and strength and mobility, the things that we need as human beings to move around our world and have a high quality of life. When I finally understood what that was that I needed to do daily, that's when there was a significant radical change in my experience with my body.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our show sponsor. John Masters Organic is leading the way in formulating luxurious organic products that you can trust. They ensure over 70% organic content across their range, and many items boast USDA organic certifications. What really sets them apart is their commitment to safety and transparency. They ban over 1,500 harmful chemicals from their formulas, choosing not to use silicones, sulfates, parabens, or artificial fragrances. Everything they make is about being safe, non-toxic, and transparent about what goes into their products and what doesn't. John Masters Organics also stands out for their ethical practices. They're cruelty-free, don't test on animals, and contribute to 1% for the planet. Plus, every order helps to reduce ocean plastics, so choosing them means making a positive impact on our environment. If you're ready to elevate your beauty routine with products that are good for you and the planet, I've got a special offer for you. Visit johnmasters.com and use the code JUSTPODCAST to get 20% off your first order. Again, that's JUSTPODCAST. Discover the difference with John Masters Organics, where your beauty regimen becomes a clean, conscious choice. Now back to the show. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I actually want to move on to a different topic because I find this really interesting, but you talk on your account about posture and how posture relates to even mental health and physical health. And so maybe just define to us what good posture is and how that does play a role in our mental and physical health.
Yeah, great. So let's start off with what it is. And this could be a whole podcast, by the way, just the mental and the emotional role of things. But let's first define what it is. Posture is the position of your body. There is no good position or bad position, because every position that we can get into is a position that your body's muscles can move the joints into. The only time posture becomes a problem, so the only time a position becomes a problem, is when we can no longer get out of it, when we become stuck. Okay? So posture myth number 1 is that we have to be in a certain position all day long. Where pain and discomfort enter the picture is when our body can no longer change positions and we get stuck in that hunchback, in that rounded, or the hips don't rotate, or the pelvis and lower back become rigid. That's a body that can no longer change its posture. So that's the first thing to understand when it comes to really laying down the framework to approaching posture. There's nothing right, there's nothing wrong, it's just movement.
Okay.
Now, that being said, the position, the posture of your body reveals a lot about the health of your neuromuscular system, which muscles you probably have access to, which muscles you probably don't have access to. And looking at somebody's posture, you can start to understand not only how they're moving, but how they're feeling. So think of it like this. Without any training on acting, without any of us being FBI body language interrogation specialists, I bet we could look at somebody and probably pretty quickly gauge how they're doing today. Think about a loved one, even a friendship. Sometimes you just see them, and without even needing to check in on how they're doing, are they moping around? Are they sluggish? Is their body defeated? Is their chest compressed? Or are they walking like they own this world and they own whatever room they walk into? We use our body language all day long as a tool to communicate our mental and our emotional health. And vice versa. Our mental and emotional well-being is expressed through our body language and our positioning. So our mental state and our physical state are intrinsic. They're connected. You can't have one without the other. And where posture gets really, really interesting and fascinating is we already know that there is a mental and emotional connection, right? Emotion and motion. It's really almost the same word with one letter different.
I've never thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the same. It's all about movement and energy and expression. So what happens to a body that is so neglected where it can't change its position? Remember, there's no such thing as good posture or bad posture, except the postures that we can't get out of. So think about somebody's body who can't really express itself anymore, who doesn't possess the ability for fluid, open, expressive movement. How do you think that body affects mental health? A body that's constantly collapsed inward because the neuromuscular system is not strong enough to overcome gravity and the forces, the external forces of the world. Your improper movement patterns can absolutely influence your mental health just as much as your mental health influences your movement patterns and your mechanics. These are not separate things. We're talking about a human being in one cohesive collective unit. And to make this a little bit more real for people who are saying, no, mental health and posture, it's not connected. Remember, posture is not a rigid position. Posture is position changes. Every person listening to this who has ever done an activity that's physical, like the gym, a group class, or gone on a long walk to clear their head, has used posture to change their mental health. This is why we feel better after a workout, because we are using our body to change our mental state. Our physical state changes, our mental state changes. And conversely, if we can do great work on our mental state, we can also have physical state changes. This is why when I help people, I don't bombard them with just physical exercises and tools. I also give them mental health tools to change their relationship with pain. Because if we can change how we're thinking and feeling and relating to our body, while we're also giving our body very useful corrective exercises, my God, it's a win-win. We are attacking this problem from two really important angles, mental and physical simultaneously. And that is where these transformations are truly incredible.
Wow, that's really interesting. Very thought-provoking as well. But I do have a question for you because, okay, I understand now that posture is what we can't get out of and it's the movement, but I slouch my shoulders a lot. Every time I see myself like on video, I'm like, oh, pull those shoulders back. And it's something I've been aware of for years and years of my life. And so does that mean it's an emotional thing or it means that I need to do some physical exercises?
It could be both. Let's break this down. Let's talk about the physical aspects of what you just talked about. So you're noticing, let's just call it a collapse of the upper body. The shoulders are rounded, we slouch forward. Okay, this is a physical postural position. Posture, when you're not moving, like when you're sitting or when you're standing, when your body's at rest, your body position, your posture is the sum of function. It's how all the nerves and the muscles work at rest, which is why I needed to debunk the myth right away that there is a position you have to be in. Think about for yourself. You see yourself rounded. If this is your natural state, now what you're doing is saying, no, let me be different. Let me override my natural state. You are overriding your natural body position with your mindset and your thoughts and your emotions. And now the real question is, well, how long can you maintain that before it gets tight, before it gets tense, before things start to hurt? And then you go, or before somebody calls, a really important client comes through the door, then you kind of go right back to your natural state. If we can get the body to work better, meaning you have more access to muscles in the front and back of the body and they have a better balance ratio, you will naturally sit better, which this moves us to the next big myth about posture. You cannot outthink movement problems. That's why we all struggle with posture, because we're trying to outthink it. We're trying to override our movement. And we do this with cues all day long. Pull this, tuck this, chin back, draw forward. We're trying to like override our physical state. And for how many of us, we still are doing that and it still doesn't work and it's still uncomfortable. So it's our misunderstanding of what posture is that then leads us to having to always manipulate our body. Now, on the flip side, what if I gave you a routine that you did every day that gave you better access to these muscles, these extensor muscles that hold you upright? They work better. We relax tension in the front side of the body that's pulling you down. You've got a better homeostasis, a better equilibrium. How much more at ease are you going to feel? What is your relationship to what you're going to see on camera when you actually do notice without thought and effort that things might just be in a better position, more of a power, more of an authority, more of a confident position? So maybe your emotions right now aren't what's holding you down. It could purely be physiologically, but emotions are not separate from that because you're still having an emotional experience when you see your body, which is why you're trying to override it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, really interesting. So I'm gonna come back to you after this podcast and ask you what those daily exercises are to help that. But I want to go back to the mental health part of this. So are you saying that you can look at people and if they're just like slouching and down, that they're dealing with mental health issues, or that's not what you're saying?
You could have a pretty high level of certainty on somebody's emotional state by the way they carry themselves and what they're feeling. Now, is that a diagnostic tool? Absolutely not. But people's body language is the window into what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And why it's not a 100% diagnostic tool is how we learn to cope with the world. We also learn that expressing things is not good. Now, I don't know about everybody, but I grew up in a household where emotions were viewed as weakness, to not show your hand, to not be vulnerable, to not allow people to see you for who you are, to hide. So I got really good at disassociating. I would walk into the room feeling like an imposter, feeling like I shouldn't belong here, very low confidence, but I overrode that by forcing my will and forcing my way into something. So we as human beings, the nuanced part is we learn how to mask what we're feeling. We learn how to fake what we're feeling. So that's why it's not always 100% yes by the way somebody carries himself. You understand what their inner world is. But chances are really high that by just looking at and observing somebody, seeing their body language, you can understand what they're feeling. And we all do this. I think we even do it subconsciously. We're trying to read the room at all times. We're trying to read our partners. When we go on a date, is this person interested in me? What is their body language? Are their arms folded and they're protected? Are they closed off? Or are they leaning in? Are they open and receptive to connection? We use our bodies as an instrument. It's a vehicle to express what we're feeling. So it's not too hard to look at the body as a window into what is this person's mental and emotional state right now.
Okay, so do you think then if people that are dealing with depression, anxiety, different mental health issues, as they heal from these issues, their posture just naturally will improve itself?
I think it can. I mean, think about, again, without any training, if I were to ask all of our listeners to close their eyes and imagine how somebody who's sad moves, we kind of already have an idea of what that looks like without being biomechanical experts or therapists. And if I were to tell the audience to then now close your eyes and imagine how that same person who's happy and feels empowered and confident and on top of the world and in touch with their emotions and they're intimate with their partners and is more fulfilled, how would that person walk into a room? We already know that there's a shift, just naturally and intuitively. So yeah, I think as somebody resolves and heals and deals with trauma and learns better coping mechanisms and shows up in the world more authentically and more powerfully, hell yeah, you're going to notice a difference in the way that they're moving. It's going to be loud. It's going to be very clear.
And so if someone comes to you with mental health issues, poor posture, are there daily tips that people can do who are listening at home? Or is this a one-on-one thing that they have to do? Do you know what I mean? Are there little things that they could take away that they could practice at home?
Yeah. So there's two things that I give them. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not a licensed therapist. So I'm a huge advocate for therapy. If somebody's really struggling with mental health issues, please get the mental help that you need. That's going to be a really helpful tool in your toolbox for making a change in your life. Now, that being said, I give people physical tools to change the physical state, whether it's exercises to calm the body down. Maybe it's to invigorate the body. Let's get things moving. Again, if you've ever had feeling down or stressed and you've gone to the gym to work that out, you've recognized you can use exercise to change your mental and emotional state. So I give people the physical tools to do that. I also give people who are struggling with chronic pain, because there's not a lot of mental and emotional help out there. I give people tips, and it's actually a 31-day program to fundamentally change their framework and their ability to approach pain, talking about their relationship with pain. So when they feel it, what is the language? What are the thoughts? What's the dialogue? When they're triggered, when they feel that intense pain, do they push people away? Do they ask people to lean into them? How do they as a human being show up in the world? Because again, I don't think we can fix problems until we become clear as to what's going on. So for the person who's struggling with the mental and the emotional stuff, and they're having physical problems, I'm at least going to give them the framework to start taking that really crucial step forward daily. And for many people, it's just throwing on one of my guided audio meditation lessons and just laying on their back. Maybe that's all they have the energy for that day. And maybe for some people, it's, okay, I can't live like this. Let me get things moving. I gotta feel energy and life source in my body again. And so I give them those movements that they need.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about chronic pain. You touched on that just for a second, but I want to know if these are myths or are they really things that we all should be doing, because you always hear like, oh, if you have hip pain, make sure you're stretching every day. Like you need to be more flexible. So is stretching and getting rid of some of that muscle tightness a good thing for those that are in pain?
Stretching alone is not a great thing by itself. It holds value. So let's look at this in two parts. So there's stretching, there's holding a position and just asking a tight muscle to lengthen. The value of that is it helps you actually breathe and ease into discomfort because it's making that muscle feel uncomfortable. And that could be very parasympathetic activating, right? When you stretch, this is why people feel a little bit more relaxed and at ease because they're kind of creating that discomfort and relaxing into that discomfort. So there's value, benefit, and merit in static stretching, but that can't be the only thing that's done. The other category is dynamic stretching. So we're talking about subtle movements that take you into a muscle stretch and then out, and then in and out. That gets nerves and muscles to work better together. So that's mobility training. So we've got flexibility training, which is just holding stretches, which can be helpful to regulate the nervous system. And then we have mobility training, which gets our body stronger and more comfortable with the joints moving. People who just do mobility training are missing the benefits of stretching. People who just stretch are missing the benefits of mobility. So most of the times, the recipe for success is having a really nice blend of both. Positions that calm your body down and stretch those tight muscles, and simple, gentle movements that activate and prepare your body for movement. We as human beings need both in environments that don't really require us to move out of necessity anymore.
Okay, because quite often my husband will have like lower back pain or hip pain, and therapists or whatever always say, well, make sure you're stretching every day. So if he's doing both the flexibility and the mobility stretching, it could be a benefit then.
It could be a huge benefit. And he's probably learned when I've got back pain, let me stretch to downregulate the nervous system and take that edge off. And that could be helpful. If it's reoccurring back pain, then all stretching might be doing is just helping somebody tread and stay afloat, just kind of manage the symptoms. Mobility work tends to go after why those symptoms are even here in the first place, which is restoring that teamwork of muscles so the joints and the soft tissue don't have to bear the full weight of it.
Oh, that makes sense. I like that. Okay, so then I want to ask you about core training, because you always hear like, oh, your lower back hurts, then you need to work on your core muscles. I mean, I hear that almost on a daily basis. So is that true, or?
How much time do we have? We got some time?
A few minutes.
Core training is valuable. However, most people will train the core dysfunctionally. Okay. So core training could be a nice band-aid to at least stabilize the body if it doesn't move well, right? Because you're training a tight core, so things don't really move. But that doesn't really solve for the underlying problem. Most people do so much core training, brace this, tuck that, tighten the abs, that no wonder why their back and hips feel so stiff and tight, because they're doing excessive core training. They're training their body not to move. If you do basic movement patterns like squatting, lunging, floor-based movements that get your hips and shoulders to work together, that's core training. I think this emphasis on we have to train our core, people will just take that and they'll go, an inch wide and 10 miles deep in that concept. And what most people experience is the stronger their core gets, the worse their entire body feels, because they're just strengthening the dysfunction. Most people need to just get the legs and the shoulders working better together, and that core, that midsection in between that, will start to work better.
So interesting. So you're not a big sit-up fan?
I'm not a big sit-up fan.
That's so interesting, because yesterday I was doing squats at the gym, and I had added some more weight, heavier weight than I normally do. And I really had to use my core to stand up. And I was like, why the heck doesn't this count as a core workout, me doing these squats? And in reality,
so
it does,
core.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so core because that's a basic movement pattern. So squatting, I love that you're doing that. That is a fundamental optimal movement pattern that you're going to do for the rest of your life. Squatting is something that we do to get in and out of chairs. It shows up all the time. That counts as core work. Where people get weird is they'll do excessive core work afterwards. So think about when you're squatting, your ankles, knees, hips, pelvis, spine, you have hundreds of muscles that are learning how to fluidly work together better as a team. And then we go target some muscles to work more, like just doing a bunch of sit-ups. Now we're putting a huge focus on this one muscle. Short term, it can emotionally feel good, right? We're tightening up the midsection. Maybe aesthetically, we're checking the box. It feels good to have a tight, whatever that is. But long term, we're just kind of playing favorites with what muscles we like. And some muscles get stronger than others. And this is where muscle imbalance really starts to take shape. The thing we have to get very clear on is core work was invented. 100 years ago, nobody was having these conversations. For thousands of years in human history, if not tens of thousands of years, what the hell did we do without core work? We existed and survived because basic movements are enough to stabilize and get the core working. Where people get really weird is we start to get like dogmatic. Your core's got to do this. You got to do these crunches. And we start doing these really unnatural motions that don't actually translate into you being a healthier, more optimized human being. You can do all the sit-ups all you want. How's that going to help you sit? And how's that going to help you stand at trade shows? You doing squats and deadlifts and lifting heavy things and using the right leg and the left leg, this is what's going to translate directly to you having a better life. We have to, in the gym, train for the real world, not just train at being good in the gym. We can't just do core work just to be good at doing core work. It has to mean something and it has to go somewhere. And I think we've forgotten that exercise is really evolutionary, unnatural. You know, it's not something. We are the only species that structures movement and burns calories for health reasons. Movement used to be out of necessity, and now it's out of purpose. You know, maybe that's going off on a tangent or standing on a soapbox here. I'm not saying the core is not important. What I am saying is if you can do total body movements, the core is going to get trained as it should work.
I love that. I love all that you said. I'm going to get rid of the dumb sit-ups at the end of the workout.
You'll probably notice that when you stop doing that and you focus a little bit more on natural movement patterns like squats, that's another thing that's going to bring you a little bit more upright because you're not training yourself to round and get strong rounding. You're actually training yourself to stand up and resist gravity. Watch what happens to your body.
But we should make sure people know, though, you're not against the gym and you're not against exercising. You're just don't love the one-on-spot treatment type things.
Yes, I'm a huge proponent. I mean, I'm an ultra marathon runner, so I abuse my body with exercise every day. I'm a huge fan of people getting stronger. I'm a huge fan of people working out, getting healthier, moving towards that. But we have to, as we're considering what we're going to do to get stronger, we have to consider, how does this translate? Things don't work in isolation. So isolation training tends to make people feel really weird and move really weird. And I see this all the time. It's, you know, somebody will go to the gym, they've got their favorite exercise and they strengthen the heck out of their body with those exercises. And they notice the stronger they get in like a bench press, the less the shoulders kind of move functionally, the harder it is to reach overhead. We've got to get back to human movement patterns and strengthening those, not just picking parts and pieces and then just going hard in the paint with those.
That makes sense. Thank you. I do have a question, though, that I'm curious about because we've talked about back pain and, you know, different things for the back, but we live in a world where so many of us sit all day long at work. And so is there a proper way to sit to not hurt our back so much and our shoulders so much? Or are you against sitting all day and using, one of those walking desks? Or what are your thoughts on this?
The narrative that's been around for probably the past 20, 30 years is sitting is the new smoking, right? I think we've all heard how disastrous sitting is. But when studies were actually done in still active hunter-gatherer populations, they found that hunter-gatherers were spending about as much time idle as modern Westerners were. So about 10% of the world, the modern industrialized part of the world, we actually idle times are not too far off of people who are still using their bodies out of necessity for survival. The difference is they aren't using chairs. And that's why chairs have become the villains and the bad guys. When these people are idle, they'll sit on the ground. And when you sit on the ground, it's not that comfortable to sit on the ground. So what you do is you change positions a lot. When you sit in a chair, it's very comfortable. You and I could be sitting for hours without even moving a hip or shifting our body. So it's not that the chair's the bad guy. We are just assuming one position and only one position. There was another study done that showed most modern Westerners, which I would consider all of us in this population, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a modern Westerner, we only sit in probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 positions a day.
Wow.
Whereas pre-industrialized cultures, they get their body in and out of over 100 different sitting positions a day, which is why they can move better, which is typically why they have better joint health and muscular health, because they're moving their bodies in different positions all day. So then that brings the conversation back to, how can we find ways to change our body position more throughout the day? If you are going to sit, great. Why not find a way to sit like this? And I know it sounds silly.
It.
You know, this is one way to sit, and you could spend 15 to 20 minutes in a deep squat, and it's going to make squatting more comfortable. Why not sit sometimes on the right hip, and then in a couple minutes switch over and move to the left hip? This is actually mobility training, because I'm putting my body in deeper ranges of motion. I'm a huge fan of stand-up desks because they get you to change the position. Walking treadmills is you changing your position while you need to be stationary. Now, one of the biggest differences, just because I'm highlighting the pre-industrialized cultures and how humans used to live, and post-industrial cultures like our own, idle times were almost the same, maybe an hour or two different, meaning the pre-industrialized cultures just moved an hour or two more a day. But the major difference was the intensity of movement, the amount of time spent in higher heart rate zones. And that is something we're sorely missing. So it's not that us being idle is the problem. It's that when we move, we don't really move vigorously anymore. We don't really move that much. We drive to the grocery store and we park as close as possible. And we drive, we lug the groceries back and we drive right back home. Or we DoorDash and we have apps deliver us food. So it really comes back down to how we can change positions. And, answering the question, well, most of us are sitting all day long. So how do we do that? This is where it goes right back to that first myth, which is there is no right or wrong way to sit. How you're sitting is how your body's natural state functions. So even if I were to say the proper way to sit is to roll the pelvis forward, sit tall with the hips, relax the upper body, let the shoulders come back, you wouldn't be able to maintain it for more than a few minutes. It's either a ton of work because it's overriding your natural state, or it's going to be really uncomfortable, muscles are working differently, or you just forget and you go right back to how you are. So it almost doesn't matter, which is the same advice as sleeping. It doesn't matter because you're probably going to change positions as soon as you start to fall asleep. What matters is the body we're bringing into that chair and how that body works, which always comes back to what is our daily movement practice? What is our daily self-care practice where we can get the joints and nerves and muscles just moving better? Because if I sit on a chair and I naturally have better balance, I'm going to naturally be in a more efficient posture all day long versus total collapse by the end of the day because I'm just not strong enough to resist being in a chair. Does that make sense?
It does. And that is such great advice because I've always been worried, like my employees, I'll see them sitting all day long. And so now I'm going to show them what those movements you just showed and talk to them about this because you do with what you can. You make things better with what you can. And so those are great tips. And you've given so much good advice today and a lot of just things to think about. But if people want to come to you to learn more of these self-care tips, or some of these daily tips, can they find this all on your Instagram account or do they come to you personally? What's the best way for people to learn these things?
Yeah, so I think it starts with, get a feel of who I am and how I teach and what I have to teach. Follow me on social media. You can follow me at Pain Academy. That's most of the social channels. That's going to give you a taste of what this is. If you want a more comprehensive, like an actual custom tailored solution, I've built an online program that tailors itself based on what helps your body move and feel better. So this is the big flagship thing here. It's called the Movement Program. I'm not a creative namer, so that's just what I called it. And it's a year-long course that fundamentally teaches people how to establish a movement practice that they know how to relax their body. They know how to increase flexibility and strength and mobility and stability, the things that the body needs. This is what I take a year to teach people every single day inside that course, how to reconnect with their body and just take better care of themselves. So if you follow me and the things that I'm saying make sense, if you're starting to connect the dots, then the program's going to blow your mind.
Oh, I love that. I have so many more things I could talk to you about because, it takes you a year to show everybody all these things and there's so many things we can talk about. But this was a great start to introduce people to this and to give them some thoughts to think about. But is there anything that you want to wrap up with, any advice that you want to give them? Or is it just best that they come to the places that you just mentioned?
I think it is best to come to the places that I mentioned, but that is also a very easy throwaway answer. I didn't learn about pain from textbooks. I didn't learn about overwhelm through somebody else. I lived that. And that was what my life was like for my entire 20s. So if you're out there and you're struggling with your body, you're overwhelmed, some people say do this, some people say don't do that. There's so much noise out there. We have to make this simple because that's where you're going to thrive. So let me help you make it simple. Let me give you some simple principles. I don't want you to trust me. I want you to trust your nervous system, do these things and watch what happens. Your body will tell you what you need. So let's not overcomplicate it. I know you might be feeling overwhelmed and probably also not feeling great inside your body. It doesn't need to be rocket science. We just need a couple movements that we can rely on daily to start rejuvenating what is really happening on a physiological level.
I love that so much because I say the exact same thing in the diet world because I'm always like, there's so much noise out there about eat this, don't eat this. And I'm like, just simplify it. Just let's eat real food. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be, the strange kale and sardine only diet type thing. It's just, let's simplify it. Stop listening to all the noise and getting so frantic about it. Let's just do few basic, simple things of just eating real food. That's what's going to help your body feel the best. So I love that it's the same approach, but with movements, emotional help, things like that.
Why do you think the basics are so hard?
That's the $1 million question. In reality, the basics should be easy, but we complicate them. And I think we complicate it as a society with the noise.
Yeah, I think we make it, this problem that we're having, especially one that's impacted our lives and it's got a lot of emotion wrapped around it. I think we, something that feels really big, we go looking for the really big thing, right? It's got to be some super, I must be missing this really expensive supplement that is going to get all of my mitochondrial functions and enzymes to work. But if we just come back to the basics, let's source our food a little bit better. Let's eat a little bit better. Let's just start moving the body a little more. My God, It might not fix everything, but it might give you a 10% improvement of your life. And I think we all probably could do great feeling 10% better.
Yep. Well, I love that your approach is very similar to mine. I really appreciate that simplicity. And so thank you so much for being here. I know the listeners, like I said, have learned a lot and a lot of things to think about. And listeners, go check out his advice on his Instagram, his website, things like that. You'll learn even more. It will help you, especially those that are in chronic pain or even in pain. I feel like every single one of us on a daily basis has something, aching or not feeling the greatest. And so this applies to everyone. So thank you so much for being here. But I always end my podcast with asking my guests what they have found to be the best ingredient in life. And what would you say it is?
The best ingredient. Well, I think of, ingredients are something you add to make something better, to make something more complete. I feel like with my experience, the ability to move freely is the best ingredient, because when we can do that, when we can move well, everything we get more enjoyment out of it. We're able to connect deeper with our partners. We're able to be more intimate. We're able to use our body as a vehicle for emotional expression, for physical expression. We get to push our body and reconnect with hard work. Everything is better when you've got the ingredient of a body that shows up and you're allowed to push it and it doesn't push back. So my answer is a body that moves freely is by far the best ingredient that I found in life. It just makes everything better.
I love that. And you know what I love about it is that it's a body that moves freely, physically and emotionally. So I love that.
We're all moving there. I think we're all as a collective, consciousness moving in that direction.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here, but also thank you for just taking a hard thing in your life and now trying to help others with it. I just really honor that and appreciate that. I think if we're going to make changes in this world, it's going to come from people who are turning their negative hardships in life into positive things to help others. And so thank you for being an example of that and doing that.
You as well. Thanks for having me on. And I would love a round 2 if you ever want to have me back.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe to the Just Ingredients podcast to learn more about your health and good ingredients to life. Plus, get daily tips at just.ingredients on Instagram.